Hello, doctor. I know a lot of people who are very keen to go back to their workplace. But at the same time, due to the current coronavirus situation, lockdown is going on. This has led to a lot of anxiety and stress in their mind. How can we cope up with this situation? How can we help them? Can you please guide me?
This is a very relevant and very timely question, I would say. To answer this complex question, I have to divide my talk into two different groups. One in terms of some age groups, and I divide these age groups between children and young adults and the elderly, and I will come to that later on. And the other part of my answer would comprise of, there are two sources of anxiety in this particular situation. One source is a fear of death, which I understand. The second source is actually the fear of loss of jobs and income, leading to extreme sense of insecurity. And it is actually happening particularly among a certain group which belongs to the unorganized or non-organized sector of the country. Let's come to the point of the fear of death. Let me tell you that this particular COVID-2 virus is an extremely mild disease, and this is something which is not being highlighted publicly or in the media very much. But I think this is something that we should put more stress upon to reduce the anxiety in general. What is dangerous about this particular virus is its infectivities. It is extremely infectious, unusually infectious, and that is a main characteristic of this particular disease, not the fatality. So the majority of the infection will happen and will end in a very innocent and innocuous consequence. And only a very minuscule percentage that too among the elderly and very sick people, will actually die and go into the ventilator. This is something that everyone should understand. But what is the main problem of this particular disease is not dying, but is actually its infectivity, it's spreading. So it doesn't stop, it has to stop. If it doesn't stop, then we cannot come out of the house and start to work. So somehow we have to stop this transmission, that is the most important, so that we can come out and get into our job as quickly as possible. This is the main part. And so there is actually very little fear of death, but what is problem about is the infectivity. So if the fear is around death and terrible morbidity, I think this is something I must, as a doctor, say to dispel the anxiety. This is no, you should not worry too much about that. But what worries me more is the anxiety around the loss of jobs, in the loss of income, the sense of tremendous insecurity about the future. I think this is something which is very unfortunate, but there is a special group among the unorganized sector where all of us, actually, those who can afford, whether it is at the government level or at the individual levels or at the level of different organizations, corporates, they all have to come out of their shell and donate profusely to support this group of people, so that they don't have the anxiety. Otherwise, what I suspect, there will be much more death due to non-COVID causes, like malnutrition, hunger, even suicide, than actually COVID deaths eventually. And that's very unfortunate for any country. And we should be very sensitive about this issue from now, not later when all this starts happening. So that's my view about this anxiety. This is how we can actually dispel the anxiety. At the home level, let me tell out, there are children and young adults who normally are extremely active and functional outdoor. They have now become homebound. So, but actually what we should do, we have to keep them meaningfully engaged, the children. I think currently this online education etc. What is happening is a very good initiative that many sectors are taking, all the schools, colleges, universities. This is a very good idea. In fact, I have got the inputs from somewhere that they are actually studying better at home than they're going to school, because they're saving a lot of time. And some of the guardians are actually happy because they're able actually to supervise them at a close, from a very close this thing. So this is one thing. About the elderly, I think it is important that one should not discuss too much about this COVID issues in front of the elderly. And I would rather like them to be engaged in viewing televisions, which is a completely different, like old cinemas, theatres, etc. Viewing totally different. I mean, we should divert their attention from the COVID to completely non-COVID entertainment. That is very important. We should not even discuss about this from the elderly. This is important. I can hear from different sources that there are elderly whose the only pastime is doing shopping, daily shopping, and chatting with the friends. This is, of course, something that we should not allow, but we should counsel them. We should counsel them. If we counsel them adequately, then I think they will understand it. We should not allow them to go out every day, but probably just once a week or something. And but most of the shopping, I think, should be done by the younger member of the family, who are less prone to the complications of the COVID. So elderly population should not be allowed to mix in the marketplace, crowded marketplace. So that is how we can actually probably decrease the mortality due to COVID. So these are the few viewpoints that I have, which could probably dispel the unnecessary fears and anxiety associated with this particular COVID pandemic. Thank you.